Hello everyone and welcome to The Public Space. We were supposed to have Bill Gaede tonight to talk about communism, but he is not responsive by email. I'm sure he will join us at some point in the night. Maybe he has some technical difficulties. But the news are so insane that I thought, look, I cannot stop the beginning of this show. How did I get the vision to leave biology to become a broadcast news analyst? I have no idea, but it was a genius move. We are sitting on a gold mine of news. And so let's get started. But we have, as a reminder to our audience, join Entropy. This is my favorite platform for super chats because they give a good rate and they don't take your money like YouTube. So it's a great place to send me donations and questions. You can also send questions for free. And you can also participate to our survey of tonight. Do you think this relationship had a causal role in the shooting? Today we are getting a text from the ex-girlfriend of the Dayton shooter, and all of my predictions are averred. They are proven true. I've often said that polyamorous relationships are extremely dangerous. That the masculine psychology is not able to handle this, and I think that because of the jealousy aspect. And I think that the Dayton shooting case may have been caused much more than we originally thought by this kind of circumstance. Now, as I'm saying this to you guys, I see that our friend Bill Gaede has connected. And Bill, we are live. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm doing fine now that I found you. I was in a different, but I can't see you. I only see your photograph.
All right. You won't be able to see the video tonight because Google has disabled this feature, unfortunately, and I didn't find yet a way to send to the guest the video, but I can assure you that we're seeing you and the crowd is also seeing me. It's just a problem with Google right now. So, Bill Gaede, we've been discussing communism, and I've been complaining against communism, and we thought it would be a great time to talk about your experience with communism. My understanding is that you fled communism, you left the US.
Well, we got to start at square one. First I entered communism, and I was in there for over 20 years. Since the age of 15. I started very early.
Okay. But you were in a communistic movement? You were in a Marxist movement of some kind?
Well, again, when I was about 15 years old, I was reading a lot of stuff very early for my age. And I read a lot of Marx, Lenin, etc. And by the age of 20, 21, thereabouts, I don't remember exactly, I was invited to join the Communist Party of Argentina, and I did join. And we had a little group, a little urban guerrilla.
Oh yeah.
And we were planning on doing operations.
Operation. Oh, okay, like changing the world.
Well, like killing people.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It was,
so as a reminder, we cannot appeal for violence here, and so Bill Gaede is saying this as a descriptive statement about his past, and of course it is not an appeal to today's action. All right.
No, obviously things have changed a lot. If you look at that second picture I sent you there, I don't know if you received all those pictures.
Let me check. I don't think I did. Did you send them by email?
Yeah, I sent them by email. If you look, there's a second picture there, and that's the guy I followed, and the picture next to him shows how he ended up in those days. It was pretty heavy stuff.
Okay, when you say the second picture, is it Cuban TA or Dirty Wild?
No. You see Roberto Santuccio there? You don't see him? I sent you 8 pictures.
I see El Crazy Che, Extinction Paper Hong Kong, Bill
But
Gates.
at the bottom you'll see all the pictures.
Ah, okay, there they are. Oh, so I
Yeah,
will
if you
not
look at
be
number 2,
okay. I will not
look
be
at
showing
picture
this to
number
the
2.
audience, but this is a man whose face has been completely scraped off and scratched by some phenomenon of high
Bullets.
violence. Bullets. Okay.
Yeah, by bullets.
So
Yeah, that's
you
how
were
he ended
friend with
up.
this guy?
No. He never knew me. I never knew him. But he had the organization called Ejército Revolucionario del Pueblo. What is it? People's what? People's Army, Revolutionary Army.
Oh yeah, that's always
And
how the communists title their stuff.
yeah. He was a communist by far. And the left side, you see how he was, and the right side, you see how he ended up when the group of military caught up with him, and they shot him down.
Yeah, the bullets totally change his look.
Yeah. He was the first guy to die, and so was the captain that went to get him. They all shot each other in a room, essentially.
They were shooting each other as communists. They were all communists. That was an internal fight or an external one?
No. What happened was the these guys were trying to get to Cuba, and they were. By the way, can I turn the Discord off here?
Absolutely, you can.
Okay, because I get all this interruption for these. Okay, and so what happened? They were trying to get to Cuba, and they were spotted, or somehow a military patrol heard about them, and they went to this place, like 10 guys, and they caught these guerrillas in there, and there were like 8 of them, and it was just a shootout in a room. It's like they opened the door and everybody just began shooting at each other. And the first guy to die was Roberto Santucho, and the first guy to die on the military side was the captain who was running the patrol. So he became a martyr.
Well, Bill, I feel all small suddenly because I was about to share my experience with communism, which was to be a Marxist for 1 year and arguing at the dinner table with my father about how the world was unjust to minorities. You're taking it to the next level. You are talking about communist mobsters.
Yeah. I'm talking about real stuff because this was real stuff. In the 74, thereabouts, 1974, where I lived, you could hear shots every night. Every night somebody was dead. Every night. It was shootouts between the police and urban guerrillas.
And the goal was
a mass movement.
The goal was to instaurate a communist order, a kind of revolutionary action in Argentina.
Yeah, there was a very grassroots movement to overthrow the government of Perón. And Perón had died. His wife, who was the vice president, became the president, and she was really no good. And so the military wanted her out. The workers wanted her out. Everybody wanted her out. And finally, the military, made a coup, Videla, and he started what is known as the Dirty War. Lasted many years, and during that time I left Argentina, and then later on I found out what they did, with a lot of people. They tortured them, they killed a lot of women who were pregnant, they took their babies, they gave them the military, big mess, and I missed all that.
You missed all that
because I had,
you missed. Okay.
Yeah, I missed all that because I went to the United States.
Oh yeah, and there you were practicing exchange of information. You were trying to equalize the information. Was this driven by communism?
Yeah. What happened was I began to take information out of Advanced Micro Devices, the company I worked for. They made chips, and they still make chips. And that information, the process information, how to make a chip, what machines are used, the designs of the machines, the whole process, essentially the whole store, went to Cuba, to Fidel Castro over a period of 12 years, I think about 11 years. We just kept giving information to the Cuban government. The Cuban government would give that information to the Soviet Union.
Oh, you were directly involved. I didn't know that this exchange of information was to communist government. You're taking things at another level, Bill Gates, because when I was a teenager, when I was a teenager, my dream was to steal the recipe for moose sausages from the butcher of my village. And I was like, it's unjust that such good sausages can only be produced by this man. And one day he was about to die, and I called him and I said, I want your sausage recipe for moose sausages. If you die, it's going to get out of the planet Earth and no one will ever get it. And this fucker died with the recipe. But you didn't let you didn't let the butcher die. You pumped the information out of him and you spread it to communist governments. Wow.
Yeah, I was working through Fidel Castro, giving information through their embassies. Essentially, what they would do, they would send a man over, my controller, my handler. His fake name was Julian Rosa. And later on, we found out his real name. But, we would meet him at the border towns of Mexico with Texas. I lived in Texas, in Austin, Texas at the time. So we would cross the border with my wife and with our car. And in the trunk of my car, I would carry all the stuff that I had copied. Cross the border, give it to Julian, and he would take it to the embassy. The embassy would, package it and then ship it, by diplomatic courier to Cuba. And, later on, Fidel Castro invited my wife and myself to Cuba. He invited us to Cuba. We went there to Cuba. We went there 3 times. And we were taken to the place where they had all this information, which was in Pinar del Rio on the western side of the island. When we went there, I couldn't believe there was a whole room full of this stuff. I mean, I gave them so much stuff that's unbelievable. And they had like 3 or 4 people there who were translating all this stuff, I think, into Spanish for one, but I think they were also translating into Russian, but I'm not so sure about that part. They eventually give this information to the KGB guy. His name was Kryuchkov, one of the guys who later tries to overthrow Gorbachev. And a party of Cubans went down, and they were very welcomed by the KGB, who thanked them. And they said, that they had really, had a big coup in penetrating U.S. Technology, the way they would want to, because Russia was very far, or Soviet Union was very far behind on technology in several aspects. And chip technology was important because it ran the missiles and so on. And so, with that, they caught up a little bit, to the Americans.
So what years are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about 1980 to 1992.
So it was part of the build-up in the Cold War?
Yeah. The Cold War, you could say, almost came to an end in 1989. But for 3
That's
more
when
years,
Bill Gates stopped working. Bill Gates took a pause of his work and the Cold War ended.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
That's the point. It's important to know that little transition. 1989, the Soviet bloc collapsed. Germany, East Germany collapsed, etc. And what was happening is that Cuba ran into trouble with Gorbachev. Gorbachev was not going to help or subsidize Cuba anymore, and Fidel Castro was absolutely pissed about that. And but I was still helping the Cubans, okay. And they were not giving the information to Russia until, they patched up their differences. Well, it turns out that, then they had, what was his name? I can't remember the guy who replaced Gorbachev now, Yeltsin, Boris Yeltsin. And then, the thing progressed to what we have today over there. The Soviet Union collapsed, all the provinces turned into separate countries, and Russia is what it is today. But the point is that, I was helping the Cubans up to 1992. And after that, I went to the CIA and I turned myself in. And just like the Cubans told me, I thought they were going to put me in prison. And then the CIA began working with me.
So this turning yourself in, what motivated this?
Well, that's a little weird story. I was in Cuba. And I befriended some of the intelligence officers. In fact, one of the intelligence officers is the guy they traded in the days of Obama. that they traded for Alan Gross. His name was Rolando Sarraf Trujillo. We called him Rolly. And Rolly went to prison for 20 years in Cuba.
Okay.
And he was in there for 20 years. He was traded by Obama. That's the guy that they traded for Alan Gross. And he's the guy that worked with me, and they put him in prison because of me. That's how he ended in prison.
Oh.
And when I befriended these guys, they told me, look, we want to overthrow the Cuban government. And I just couldn't believe it. But that's the story they told me. I believed it. And they told me, look, we want you to go to the CIA. We're going to give you information to give the CIA. And we want to work with the CIA in secret to see if we can overthrow the Cuban government. And since I was, by that time, I was completely disillusioned with Cuba, with communism in Cuba specifically, I decided to turn myself in against the advice of my wife. She objected. She didn't like that at all. But I went there. I went to the CIA building in Langley, and I told them the story. And 45 days later, the FBI came to my house, and from that time on, we worked for like 2 years with them.
And so you ended up being charged, and did you spend time in jail? How did that work?
Well, what happened was that I started working at Intel with the knowledge of the FBI. Of course, they knew about it, but they never told Intel. And so Intel found out in a weird way about me. Turns out that the head of the security of AMD, his name was Pete Costner, and you'll see the pictures there I sent you.
Okay.
Pete Costner put an ad in the not an ad, it was like a wanted poster. Think of it that way. I don't know how they did it, but he put some kind of a wanted poster on me at the Semiconductor Association in California, which is
Wait a minute, Bill. I'm looking at the pictures you sent me, and I see a false driver license from California.
I just gave you one sample. I had like 10 or 15 more.
Wow, you were one of these international agents. And during all this time, go ahead.
I just wanted to show you where. Let's see if I can get the picture. Give me 1 second here.
All right.
Yeah, it's the picture number 4. Yeah,
all right.
Number 4. Look at picture number 4, and that is you can see there the security managers of Intel and AMD. Steve Lund is the guy from Intel, and Pete Costner is the guy from AMD. And what Pete Costner did, he put like a wanted poster at the Semiconductor Association. And Steve Lund, who had just entered Intel as a security chief, he found out about that, and he discovered that I was working for him now. And so he contacted the FBI, and the FBI, the guys on the side there, the FBI guys, Jim King and Bob Baker, David Johnson, these guys there. Yep. And he notified them. And so, the FBI, what was the FBI going to tell them? Yeah, we know. And so what Intel did was Steve Lund, he approached me and he says, look, we need for you to cooperate in an internal investigation. And it turns out the internal investigation was an external one. They wanted really information on what I did at AMD. Now, and they said if I didn't cooperate, since I signed a confidentiality agreement, if I didn't cooperate with them, then what would happen is they would have to fire me. They would have to pull my badge. Well, I was put between the sword and the wall, and okay. And so at that moment in time, I filmed the technology of Intel. What I did is I was living in Arizona at the time, and I got into the Intel database in Albuquerque, New Mexico, filmed all the specs for the top of the line, the state-of-the-art chip, which was the Pentium at the time. And I took all this information to Argentina and sold it to the Chinese and the Iranians.
But Bill, I see in your picture, there's a camera in the oven. Is this some sort of... Is this before the times cameras got smaller and that was the most secret you could get? That's a secret camera before miniaturization?
Well, I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to show it to you. I don't know if you can see it. This is the cassette. Oh, let's see. I don't know if you can see this. I still get that Discord stuff. Man, that is a
you're gonna have to show it where your neck is if you want to be in the frame. Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Can you see this?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, if you can see that, that's a little recorder. It's got the what is called the pickup cable. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. The pickup cable there.
That's what the gangster finds in your belt, and then he kills you.
No. The issue is you put this on a phone.
Oh,
you put it on the receiver.
Are you serious?
Record any call.
Wow.
Yeah. And see, the cassettes are this little. See the cassette?
This is wiretapping from the 80s.
Yeah. Exactly.
Holy shit.
And here's another. See, this is a pen that's got a it's a cable. It's a pen that's got a cable to it. And you would put it here, and you'd put it into you put the end, the plug into the recorder, and anyone who talked with you, you were recording him. If he asked you to put a pen, you would give him this pen, the other pen. And you kept this one there, and you could record him. I recorded the CIA with this.
You have a whole Batman cave of equipment.
Oh yeah. Once you're in that business, you better buy the gadgets.
Now, during all this time, you're getting paid directly in Bitcoin or what?
No. By the Cubans, I was never paid. I did that for ideological reasons only. And people have a hard time believing that.
Oh my God, the communists always get the work for free.
Yeah, you got to remember that when you're in that state of mind, you're a communist, you're a fanatic communist. You do it for the heart. You do it for the mind. You don't do it for the pocket. And it's very hard for people to believe that today. But yeah, that's the state of mind that you have. You're hypnotized. And so with the Cubans for 10, 12 years, I did it completely free, no money in there, not at all. For the Chinese and the Iranians, that's a different story. I had to do something different because I was getting back at Intel. That was the reason. This was vengeance. They had no reason to fire me because up to that point, I had done nothing to Intel. They just wanted information so that AMD could take me to court. That's what they want.
Did I hear the word uranium in what you said? Chinese uranium? No, you didn't say that. No. Okay, I misunderstood. So you were
Iran. I'm saying maybe I said Iran.
Okay, Chinese China and Iran.
Okay. Yeah, I went to their embassies and I talked to their consuls. And about a month later, they had people from their countries, engineers, come over. And we met at restaurants, and I had given them the information, the cassettes, which I had recorded, and I put them up to date verbally on what the cassettes. I complimented their education, personally.
Now, when you look at all this, is that a common situation for the international CIA agents to be so much on their own, to be subject to extortion, to be subject to reversal by their own team, and to be not sure if they're in the team of Intel or if the Intel is investigating on them? Are there many US agents out there that were operating a little bit in that gray area between being kind of corporate mercenaries and agents of the true US government?
I can only tell you what Jim King told me, the FBI agent who handled my case. And he said once, he told me, he says, look, I said, we don't, in fact, I haven't recorded. I've got it on tape. In fact, I think it's in the movie. And he said the following, he said, we don't care what these, referring to the Cubans, right? We don't care what their motivation is. We don't care if it's ideological. They didn't care about that. They said, once we get to them, we'll turn them around. We have the means to turn them around. And I think that applies to any agent. I mean, imagine an American agent and he's in Russia or in China, and, they approach him and they give him a good deal, one that they can't refuse, or maybe they got him on the spot. Maybe they found him sleeping with someone he wasn't supposed to, that kind of thing. And so they begin to bribe him, they begin to extort him, and they could be, using that guy against his own government. So that does happen, not very frequently, but it could happen, sir.
Now, looking back at this trade of information that you did, Do you regret it? Do you think are you still in the mood of spreading information? Do you have a mentality of free flow of information, like the Matrix, Joe Rogan style trip in some other dimension, or do you regret?
Well, first of all, I don't regret what I did because I did it at a time I had a certain mentality. And I don't have that mentality anymore. So I did what I did when I did it, and I don't do that anymore. Now I spread other type of information, physics.
And
yeah, it's a different business now.
And you mentioned being disillusioned with the dream of communism. What did you understand at some point in your life that made you say communism doesn't work?
Well, when one of my handlers came over, in fact, both of them, I had another one by the name of Luis Agüero later on. And, we would meet in hotels and in restaurants and so on, talk a while. And we would talk about politics. We would talk about the situation in Cuba and the Soviet Union, that kind of thing. And over time, over the years, we're talking about here 11, 12 years, a lot of things I didn't like about what I was hearing. Here were all these balseros, as they were called. They're still called, I guess, like that. People who go with a little raft from Cuba and just escape to Miami or whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, why doesn't Fidel just let them go? Freedom. They want to go, let them go. And
you said that to Fidel Castro?
No, well, I said that to the handlers. We would have these talks with them, and we would just discuss politics, philosophy, that kind of thing. And I said, why doesn't he just let them go? They want to leave the country, let them go. And, their argument was, well, it's the United States who is, fomenting this, just encouraging people to leave the island for propaganda purposes. So they had this issue. And, I didn't like the idea that they curtailed freedom. Same for the Soviet Union. So when Gorbachev came to power and he said, glasnost, perestroika, this kind of thing, a little more freedom. I said, well, this is the right guy. This guy's got the right attitude because, he's got to liberalize, a little bit, the tight noose that the communist government has over its people. And so when I go to Cuba, the first stop was Czechoslovakia at the time, and that was my first time I was came to a communist country. And the first thing you notice about a communist country is they have no food. they have a big trouble getting food up on the table, for some reason. And, we noticed that immediately. And when we went to Cuba, we saw more of the same thing. Food was a problem. And what really hurt me was not so much the food, because we knew in advance that Cuba was a poor country. You can't expect a banana republic to, put caviar on the table for everybody. And it turns out that you go there and you see privilege. That's the one that tricked me. That's the one that really got me, because I said, hold it. You got people who belong to the Communist Party, and they're affiliated with the government, and they have all these perks, all these privileges that the common man on the street does not have. And you see that, and you say, well, look, and then another thing you see is prostitutes. You see prostitutes, trying to make a living on the streets, and they don't do it for money. That's the worst part. They do it for
without
a little
money?
bit of lipstick. They do it for lipstick. You go with the lipstick, you can buy have the girls in Havana. And so because they absolutely crave cosmetics. You can bribe the entire country with cosmetics.
Really?
And that's what we did with my wife. We bought a whole bunch of cosmetics and took it to Cuba, to friends and family there. My wife, her father is Cuban. And so we took it to the family, and the women just went nuts. They absolutely went out of their minds with all the cosmetics we took down there. And it's a country that starved.
I had heard this from someone who came to the USSR. I had heard that they were bringing jeans, and jeans were extremely prized in the USSR because it was the only way to get them was to talk to an American tourist.
Yeah, they crave all these things that they don't have. Food, things, material things especially, right? And that was a big problem. But then within that society, you see privilege. You see people who have it and people who don't. And the people who have it, it turns out, they belong to the Communist Party.
Uh-huh.
So, that's when you say, well, is this what I'm fighting for free? I was doing it for free. So I'm saying, is this what I'm fighting for? Is this what Fidel Castro did, the revolution, overthrow Batista, Fulgencio Batista, to bring the same thing? And something else that you notice when you go to Cuba, you see this apartheid between Cubans and human beings. There's a difference between them. If you go to a restaurant and the Cubans are on one side and the foreigners are on the other side, they can't mix. But if a Cuban brings a foreigner as a friend to eat, invites him to the restaurant, the foreigner has to pay. And he's got to pay in dollars. They won't let the Cuban pay in pesos. You see a lot of that stuff, and it's just tremendous. It bothers me a lot, And so you see all this stuff. You see privilege. You see that the things don't work as you would think a socialist country should work. And then, at one point you just say, no, the hell with all this.
But in a lot of what you say, I hear these communist countries were not the proper communist system. There is some ideal to be reached that could be reached. I mean, do you see what I mean? I mean, we have a question on this. It's the Pepper who says, why do communists always think, this time will be different? Are they genuinely stupid? Is that what you're telling us? That ultimately you're not disillusioned with the ideal of communism, but that you didn't like their implementation?
Well, I got a lot to say about all that you just said. There's so many aspects to it. The first aspect is that, no revolution, the French Revolution, the peasant revolt in England, all these movements, the Russian Revolution, all these movements, people have idealists in their groups in this grassroots movement, right? And they go out there with picks and forks and pitchforks, and they try to overthrow the government, right? And so if they're numerous enough and they're lucky enough, they do overthrow the government. What happens next? Well, what happens next is someone takes over the government, becomes the new king, and you still have the pyramid. You never get rid of the pyramid. So I think it's an illusion, very illusory, very idealistic to think that any government can be overthrown and the workers are going to take over, which is what Marx essentially suggested, the dictatorship of the proletariat. Just impose a worker society where we're all equal. There's got to be a dictatorship because you have to control property, that sort of thing. But it turns out that the guys who take over power, look at what happened in Cuba, look at what happened in the Soviet Union, look at what's happening still in North Korea. You still have the pyramid. You have one guy at the top who's got a limousine and a lot of people on the bottom that don't have anything. And so you never get rid of that. And so I don't think so. So it's a nice ideal to think that, humans can all be equal to each according to his needs, from each according to his ability, that sort of equality. It never happened, never will. It doesn't even happen in the plant world, let alone in the animal world. I got plants. I grow plants, and you see one plant grow big and the other little guy next to it, and he gets less sun. The other guy gets all the, what is it? All the sun, Yeah. So one grows big and the other one grows small. Even within a plant, one leaf is big, one leaf is small. So you always see hierarchy. You never see equality across the board. I don't think it ever happened. Mother Nature never intended it.
Absolutely.
So I had this illusion about humans living in peace and all being equal. There's no, like John Lennon, imagine all the people living in this world, etc. It never happened, never will. It never will, because, you have to have this pyramid structure in the animal and plant world. I don't think Mother Nature made any provisions for equality.
No, equality doesn't make sense a priori unless there is an advantage in sharing, and there is rarely in evolution. Now, you seem to have been involved in technological stuff, mostly technological information, and in relation to the communist governments. But we know that there are other international networks. I'm thinking, for example, of what was established around Jeff Epstein recently and discovered recently. And I'm thinking also about the networks of influence of Israel. Have you seen these things develop, or were you just in your communist world and you didn't see that?
No, I didn't see a lot of that because, again, I was focused on what I was doing. I think I was pretty good at it because we were successful, and I don't know if they would have ever discovered us. The only reason they discovered us is I turned myself in. They had no idea I even existed out there, and so I was very focused on what I was doing. So,
All
a
right.
lot of these things, I mean, there's a lot of things going on in the world. I can't be in touch with everything, but all I can tell you is, yeah, we were successful. It was a period of my life that's left behind a long time ago. It was adventurous. It was very nice. The Cubans made passports for us. We we went with fake passports from country to country. It was a lot of fun. It was adventurous. It was nice. And again, we did it mainly for ideological reasons, and we were in a position to do so.
And
But after
so
that, when you're
for the
saying,
rest,
"What am I doing all this for?" That's when you start asking questions.
when I see you admit all these crimes, I'm thinking, for the rest of your life, you don't plan traveling, right?
I travel constantly.
Oh, you travel constantly?
I just came from
You don't give a
Argentina.
shit. I mean, I thought that when you were admitting that many crimes on the public space, that you couldn't go in much places, that they would catch you and they would take your admission as evidence.
No, I'm at peace with everyone. I don't know. Maybe the Cubans might still want to do something to me, but I doubt it. With the Yanks, I'm at peace. They put me in prison for 3 years, but I have I'm not in touch with them or anything. They're not interested in me, as far as I know. So no, I don't think there's any problem.
All right, very
I'm not. I
interesting.
don't fear it. I'm not looking over my shoulder, finding out what's
Now,
going
are you
on.
following the current political situation when you see the Democrat Party, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang? Are you tempted by the universal basic income of Andrew Yang as a form of semi-communism?
I'm not into politics anymore, and the main
Okay.
reason, you probably heard of my theory. My theory says that we're the last humans on Earth.
Oh yeah? You believe that we're headed toward extinction? Civil war?
Yeah, I think we're at the doorstep of our extinction because I think the global economy is going to collapse. Once it collapses, no one produces food or distributes foods to the cities. That's what I think is going to happen. That's a mass extinction. 8
Well,
billion people die in a matter of weeks.
I mean, the food system is quite reliable in distant countries. I mean, on the
Only
countryside.
because of money. Only because of money.
I mean,
When
I
money
don't know.
disappears, there's no more food.
I think you've been hanging out too much downtown because
I know everybody thinks
just
I'm
drive
crazy.
2 hours from any big city, and what you see is a network of people essentially trading tomatoes for potatoes, for lumber for the winter, and they could make an abstraction of money to some extent. It's quite simple to capture.
The whole thing is driven by money in the end. Without money, there's no food. No one produces food without money. No one.
Well, there is still something like a communist in you, Bill Gaede. You are ultimately afraid of capitalism the way Karl Marx was.
No, I'm just reasoning that for several reasons we're at the end of the line. One is we've lost our genetic diversity, so we can't go very long from a biological standpoint. The other one is our population pyramid has started overturning in 1963 steadily. Year after year, we have fewer birth rates. Okay, year after year, the birth rate is falling. The United Nations demographers predict that if everything continues as it's going so far, it's been going on for the last 50 years, by mid-century, we reach zero population growth. One person is born, one person dies. There's no increase in population on the planet. So those things are in the background, but I'm saying that's not what's going to cause our extinction. Our extinction is going to be caused because money will be no more. The global economy will collapse. It can't grow forever, especially if population is declining.
Money is there as long as people need a unit to trade, right?
Money is there because we created this abstraction called money. We had all kinds of money throughout history. We had bartering. We went to gold. We went to paper, and now we're in numbers in a computer. That's what Bill Gates is worth. He's worth whatever he's got, whatever number he's got in a computer. That's it.
We're
And these
beyond that,
abstractions
Bill
are what,
Gates.
and these,
We've reached
and these,
Bitcoin. Bitcoin
but yeah,
is the
which is another
summon.
electronic coin. But the point here is that this is money, but money is an abstraction. Money has no intrinsic value. And the only thing that keeps the entire system in the world, on the planet, going is money. If God wants to kill man tomorrow, all he's got to do is somehow erase all the money in the world, right? He erases all the money. What agricultural corporation, which produces at least 50% of the food on the planet, what agricultural corporation is going to produce food without any money?
I mean, I know a couple of guys who would continue producing tomatoes as long as the guy who makes the lumber brings them lumber.
Yeah, and so I produce food too. One thing is to produce food for yourself, which is not even possible so easy today, especially not in your apartment. Everybody's got an apartment these days. Most of the people live in the city, so most of the people would die.
Oh, yeah.
But nobody's got a farm. It's the corporations which have farms today. And in fact, I think one of the reasons Trump has no problem with what's going on with China, for example, is that he doesn't care if the little farmer loses his farm and goes to the cities, because who's going to buy it? The corporation. And as long as the big corporations buy out their farms, he doesn't care if a lot of farmers lose their farms, individual farmers lose their farms and go to the city. That's happened in history many times. So that's why I don't think they care. They subsidize them with some money. Whoever can live, and then the guy who loses his farm because he can't pay the mortgage or the loan that he got from the bank, he loses his farm. They don't care, because the farm is taken by a big corporation, which now has economies of scale applied to it and can produce probably more efficiently and cheaper whatever they're producing. And so they don't care. But my point is that agricultural corporations produce the majority of food. They don't go out there and barter. Believe me, they do it for money only. No money, no food, no
All
distribution.
Right. Well, let me tell you that I'm personally very enthusiastic about the future you described, because something tells me that my personality is more adjusted to a zombie apocalypse, and that I would be better in a shotgun shooting waves of zombie humans coming at me than just a YouTuber with IDs. Fernando Covet says, Bill did what he did before rope came to town. That's one question I had. The transition between that part of your life where you were doing all the Central and electronics to the rope theory, how did that happen? Was this a progression? Did the rope came progressively in your mind, or was it just like a big roll of rope just dropping into your brain?
Well, the first thing, I was in prison when I developed the rope model, and it came out of the issue with God. Nothing to do with physics, really, to start out with. I come from a very strong atheist background. My family was atheists. They were militant atheists. We were living in Baltimore when what's her name? Madeleine Murray O'Hair. I don't know if you heard about her. She was the founder of American Atheists. And she was a friend of ours. She would come to our house, and she recruited my father and mother. And we joined her organization very early when she was just starting out. And so we always talked about, religion at home, politics and religion. And we talked about the Bible. We were very well versed in Christianity and Bible and all that kind of stuff, but from the other point of view. So when I go to prison, I knew my Bible. I knew it. I read it 3 times completely, so I knew my Bible very well. And you find all these guys who committed crimes out there, they do primarily drugs. Mm-hmm. They come in there and suddenly they find God in prison. They become born again Christians or born again Islamists. And so I had talks with these guys. And of course, I found out that they didn't even know their own books. They never read the Bible. They never read the Quran.
Oh, Bill Gates.
And so, we were
the party pooper in prison, shutting down the awakenedness of these men to the truth of Jesus. I can't believe it.
And so, we had discussions, and one day, a couple times, in fact, they said, well, prove to me that God does not exist. And so I said, oh, okay. And I said, I'm going to find a good answer for this. And that's when I started looking into physics. And when I look in physics, I find black holes, Big Bang, and all this nonsense that I hear about, time dilation, going back and killing your grandfather, and and all this nonsense that they have out there. And I said, no, forget about religion. This is religion. This is true religion. And that's when I started investigating. I said, well, look, if I'm a rational guy, how come I cannot rationalize how this universe works? I should be able to know what light is, what gravity is, what magnetism is, what electricity. I should be able to explain it in a rational manner. That's when I started researching. And after about a year and a half, I came up with the idea of the rope. I said, the rope. and that's what I have to this day, the rope. A torsion along the rope. That's what light is.
Wonderful. Thomas Howard says, this guy's insight on plant hierarchies is very perceptive. Reminds me of Jordan Peterson. Don't hate my take on this, JF. Well, that's a very nice compliment, Bill Gaede. You may be on your way to becoming a millionaire if you have these Jordan Peterson qualities. Thomas Howard says, the guest believes in a coming economic collapse. JF believes we will be turned into a component of a more advanced genetic form as mitochondria and chloroplast were. All I know is something is coming. Nietzschean modernist says, Viva General Pinochet, Viva General Stroessner, free helicopter rides. Wow, that is quite something. K.A. says, Bill, was your needle experiment replicated?
The what?
The needle experiment.
Oh, well, anyone can. It's a simple experiment that anyone can do. He's talking about the double slit experiment, and you don't need double slits. And I guess people in the universities never figured that out. Turns out that the slit experiment was performed originally by Grimaldi and later on by Newton. And he put a hair. And he shone a light through the hair, and he created the fringes. And then Thomas Young repeats the experiment a century later in 1800, and he does it with a double slit. But the third experiment that Thomas Young does is with a hair also. That's why I call it the Newton, the Newton hair experiment. I don't consider it mine. I consider it Newton's. And if you put a needle in front of a laser pointer, very simple experiment, just put the needle in a cork, just stick it in a cork, put it there, shine the laser pointer to it, and you'll see the fringes on the screen, on the wall or whatever.
Is that what we see?
So you can do that at home. Very simple experiment.
What you see, is it the interference pattern or the full pattern?
Yeah, you don't need slits. And the question is, you can't do that with particles or with waves. You can't do it. The only way with a rope. With a rope, you can explain it, but you can't explain that with particles. No way.
So the needle experiment, is it like...
You know why?
Go ahead.
See, let me show you something real quick.
Yeah.
Let's say that's the needle. That's my beer bottle. Okay. And the particle will hit here and will hit here, right?
Uh-huh.
And it'll bounce and it'll go outwards. It'll never bounce against the edge and go inwards to interfere with the other particle.
Yeah.
So you can't do it with particles.
But then you can with waves.
Because all the atoms are interconnected with a rope. So you can do it with a rope. You can't do it with particles or with waves.
But what you said does annihilate the possibility of a particle. But then what about a wave? A wave could go around the bottle of beer.
Only if it's like a water wave. And the question is, what kind of wave are we talking about? What is this wave? I mean, there is no physical object called a wave. You got to identify the object that is waving. What is waving? They say it's particles. So we're back to particles.
Wow.
I mean, what is water? Water's particles.
Bill Gaede comes on the public space. He comes on the public space once again, and I end up being more and more convinced that particles don't exist. But I have not discarded waves yet.
Well, I'll discard waves for you. In fact, I've had a couple videos lately. The waves are particles. What is waving? They say it's particles. What is the ether? Particles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this whole idea that a wave needs to be in something.
Right. You got to identify the physical object. And
it's a quantum field.
It's particles.
A quantum field? Would that work? You can have a wave of quantum fields.
Well, what is a field? Please identify what a field is. See, they never define the word field, and they say, oh, it's the field that's vibrating. So what's a field? What's
Well, it's
energy? What are these words?
mathematically
These are
defined
spirits.
property.
No, they're spirits. It's like saying the spirit way of vibrating. So what do you mean by spirit? Well, it's it's a spirit. You know what a spirit is, right? That's all they say. What is a field? What is energy? These words have never been defined.
Frank De
At least
Silva.
as objects.
Frank De Silva is asking, Bill, how exactly were you recruited by government agents? Through academia or political networking?
No. I was not recruited. I went to the embassy and presented myself. I gave a show. I gave a little show to the consul. So he listened to me and said, this guy is offering me technology. And that's how it worked. And, a few months later, they sent someone to my house in Sunnyvale, California, where I live. And that's when they said, look, we need for you to go to Mexico. And we went there with my wife, and we met our handler. And from there, we started working.
You went to an embassy located in the U.S.?
No, in Argentina.
No?
The first one in Argentina. The second one, well, no, hold it. I went there twice. The first guy didn't do anything. The second guy, I went to the interest section of the Cuban interest section, which was located inside the Czechoslovakian embassy in Washington, D.C. So we went to Washington, D.C. with a whole bunch of material, wafers, manuals, all kind of stuff. And I gave a show to the, I don't know if he was a consul or what he was, but he was the head of the embassy or the interest section. I gave a presentation to him. He liked the idea. And 6 months later, they sent someone to my house in Sunnyvale, and they said, look, the Cuban government wants you to go to Mexico. And that's what we did. We went to Mexico, and we met with their representatives.
Now, Bill Gaede, I was married 3 times, and all of my wives leave me for drinking too much Diet Coke or for sleeping at 11 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. How the heck did you have a wife through this that followed you on all these international adventures and didn't leave you?
I got a great wife. Yeah, I love her very, very much. We've been married, 40, too long. We've been married 40-some years, yeah.
All right.
We get along great.
Frank De Silva says, thanks, Bill, for your answer. I will be headed toward covering some news solo, but it was great hearing your story, Bill. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss tonight?
No, but if they have questions, they can put them to you and you can send them to me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Okay, we'll see you, JF. Bye-bye.
What a story. I didn't expect this. Today I was like, okay, I need to prepare a discussion about communism. All I knew was Bill Gaede is going to come and he's going to talk to you about communism. And I was like, okay, let's talk about how communism is bad. I was prepared to make some political arguments, but he comes with this freaking crazy story. Oh my God, how amazing is it to be speaking again with Bill Gaede. Wow.